Welcome to the AI Church Assistant channel. Today, we delve into one of the most infamous and mysterious events in the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Many of us have heard the story, but the real reason behind God's judgment on these ancient cities might surprise you. Let's take a closer look. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is recorded in the book of Genesis, chapters 18 and 19. These two cities were known for their wickedness, but what exactly caused such divine wrath? Common interpretation: sin and immorality. Traditionally, many have been taught that the cities were destroyed because of rampant sexual immorality, particularly the sin of homosexuality. This interpretation is largely based on the events described in Genesis 19, where the men of Sodom demanded to assault the angels who were visiting Lot. For centuries, this has been viewed as the primary reason for God's judgment. But is this really the whole story? The bigger picture: injustice and inhospitality. While the sexual sins of Sodom are certainly mentioned in the Bible, a deeper examination of Scripture reveals that there is more to the story. God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't solely about sexual immorality. In fact, multiple passages in the Bible provide fresh insights into the true nature of the sins that led to the destruction of these cities. Let's turn to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 16, verses 49 to 50, which explicitly states, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them, as you have seen." This verse gives us a broader perspective. According to Ezekiel, Sodom's primary sins were pride, gluttony, and a lack of care for the poor and vulnerable. The people of Sodom were wealthy, but they hoarded their resources, neglecting the most basic commands of justice and mercy. They were arrogant, indifferent to the needs of others, and failed to show kindness to strangers. Inhospitality, a grave sin in the ancient world. In the ancient world, hospitality was considered one of the highest virtues. Travelers often depended on the kindness of strangers for their very survival. To deny food, shelter, or protection to those in need was seen as a grave offense. When the two angels visited Lot in Sodom, Lot welcomed them into his home, offering them protection from the dangers outside. But the men of Sodom responded with hostility and violence, attempting to violate the sacred duty of hospitality. This rejection of strangers and their malicious intent reflected a deeper moral corruption, one that extended beyond personal immorality to societal injustice. In fact, when we look at the broader narrative of Genesis, Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, had just finished negotiating with God to spare the cities if even 10 righteous people could be found. But Sodom and Gomorrah had become places where the cries of the oppressed and marginalized were drowned out by the arrogance and cruelty of its citizens. Judgment and mercy. The role of intercession. It's important to remember that before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham stood before God and pleaded for mercy on behalf of the cities. In Genesis 18, we witness one of the most profound examples of intercession in the Bible. Abraham appeals to God's justice, asking if he would destroy the righteous along with the wicked. He begins by asking God if he would spare the cities for the sake of 50 righteous people, and God agrees. Abraham continues to negotiate the number down to 10. This moment highlights God's willingness to show mercy if there had been even a small number of righteous individuals within the cities. Sadly, not even 10 could be found. Yet the story reminds us that God is not quick to anger. His judgment is always tempered by his desire for justice and righteousness. A broader biblical theme: social justice. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is not an isolated story. It echoes throughout the Bible as a warning about societal sin, particularly in regard to social justice. In the New Testament, both Jesus and the apostles refer to Sodom as an example of how communities can fall when they ignore the needs of the vulnerable. In Matthew 10:14-15, Jesus warns the cities that reject his message, saying it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for them. This comparison suggests that the ultimate sin of Sodom wasn't just individual immorality, but a collective disregard for righteousness, justice, and hospitality. Likewise, in the letter of Jude, verse 7, Sodom and Gomorrah are mentioned again, not only in relation to sexual sin, but as a symbol of a society that rejects God's moral order. Click the link in the description to create your own biblical content using our AI Church Assistant tools.